Hi, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, everyone. We'll just take another minute to wait for the rest of the participants to come in. Well, the audience, I guess, not participants. Then we will start. It's early in the morning for me. Okay, I think because I'm very mindful that this is a 1 hour webinar, so we should begin now. Uh, First off, we are very grateful for Mr. Rodrigo to agree to participate as speaker for our webinar series. This is a three-part series, and we had one last December on smart governance. So Rodrigo is going to talk to us about mobility. He is currently Deputy Head of Planning, Policy and Regulation of Mexico City's Department of Mobility, and also has a very illustrious past life as an activist and architect, right? So without further ado, let me pass it over to Rodrigo, please.
Hi, good morning for you. It's good night here in Mexico. It's really great to be with you and share the experience of Mexico City with you. Um, I'd like to start with one question. What is a smart city? What is smart mobility? Because I think many times we use this term, and sometimes it's a cliche, and we don't know exactly what we are saying about smart city or smart mobility. And I'd like to show you this picture. This picture was taken right next to my house, and as you can see, there's a LED light, and there are two cameras. Remember, the LED light is new, and the energy comes from the sun. There's a solar panel, and there are two cameras. They can detect plates, and they can detect speed, and all information is sent to a center, traffic center, that analyze this huge number of information in order to manage traffic and lights of the city. So I, I ask again the question again: what is smart city? For me, and it's my opinion, it's not a city that can implement or can smart lamps, LED lights, or a city that can implement a whole system of cameras, speed cameras. For me, a smart city is a city that can put the cameras and the lights in a single pole, in one pole. Because I think this image summarizes the problem of the third world, or problem you can see in Latin America. High technology that lives together with all processes. It was impossible for the city to coordinate that two agencies use a single pole. So the electric company put the lights in one pole, and the police put the cameras in other pole. So if I had to translate, sorry, if I had to give you a meaning of what a smart city is, I think it's a combination of three basic concepts. technology, organization, and governance. It's the intersection of infrastructure and transportation modes aimed to achieve greater and better access to the population. I'm really sorry because I'm not speaking about technology. Today, I'm speaking about the pole. I'm speaking about organization and governance and how they allow technology work better in a context of extremely complicated mobility. So what do I mean when I speak about Mexico City? Just to give you context, Mexico City is a city here in gray. I'm using two tones of gray, but in the south area, it used to be called Distrito Federal, and it has a population of almost 9 million people. The metropolitan area has a population of now almost 21, 22 million people. So it's one of the largest metropolitan areas of the world. Some people say it's the second one, the third one, but again, it's top 5. In such a context, mobility is an extremely complicated issue. If you see the model split in Mexico City, it's a pretty good model split. As you can see, if I only take into account motorized trips, only 1/3 of motorized trips are made by car or motorcycles. Most of the trips are still being made by public transport, which is a pretty good news. The public transport trips are divided in many modes. The most important modes are buses, but there's also a huge metro network. It's the largest metro network in Latin America, and I think it's the 11th in the world. It comprises 225 kilometers and 12 lines. So as I told you, if you see these numbers are pretty good. However, the numbers are good from the quantitative perspective, but from the qualitative, they're pretty bad. Singapore is leader in mobility solutions. We are also leaders in traffic. As you can see, this index, it's a qualitative index made by IBM. You can see Mexico City, among selected cities, has the worst traffic in the world. I love the name of this index, commuter pain index. Is pain, irritation. If you see some tongues made by other company, Castrol, again, Mexico City leader in bad traffic. Traffic jams are part of Mexican culture. Why? Because our system, our mobility system, in spite that it has show a really good split, is extremely fragmented, inefficient, fragile, and equitable. Why? This is one of the reasons. As I show you in the second slide, I think, the metropolitan area has two sectors. The first here in blue is Mexico City, where almost 9 million people live. The other 12 million live in the green areas in the outskirts of the city, in the neighboring state of Mexico, the Mexico City and the state of Mexico. There are almost 4.4 million trips made between these two entities every day. However, there is nothing like an integrated transport system. What does it mean? This. This is a metro station, but also a BRT station right in the border of the city. People who travel from the outskirts of the city, of the peripheral municipalities of Mexico, when cross the border of Mexico City, have to leave the vans and take another van or another bus or the metro, have to pay again, have to pay twice. It takes a lot of time in the connection, and the place in which the connection takes place is really bad, ugly, dangerous, dark, etc. Because why? Because the Mexico City and the state of Mexico have different transport modes, different payment methods. They have different fares. Everything is different. They do not communicate. Inside Mexico City, within Mexico City, there used to be many organizations. These are all organizations that used to be in Mexico City: Secretariat, Metro System, Trolleybus System, Light Rail, BRT, buses, etc. But the problem is not they are different modes; it's that they are different institutions, and there's not a centralized planning. There's not a centralized management of the systems. That's why it's extremely fragmented. As you may guess, this system is extremely inefficient. And this is the main problem. 60% of all the trips made by public transport are being made in these mini buses, which are, I don't want to say that they're informal, but they are scarcely regulated. We don't even know the number, but according to our account, there are 15,000. There's not a register. These units are extremely old. They are more than 30 years old, extremely uncomfortable, pollutant, unsafe. And that's how most of the people travel in the city. When we talk about structured systems, and this is the BRT, the situation is not better. You usually see overcrowding in the stations and in the buses. These buses are pretty good, to be honest. They are new, they are non-pollutant, they are Euro 6, they are some electric buses. But travel experience is really bad. This picture was taken in 2019, pre-COVID. Metro system, the same situation. And in the outskirts of the city, you can see many informal solutions for the trips made by people. These are pedicabs, or these are carts used as taxis. As you can guess, these systems are not regulated. Many times they are controlled by gangs, but they have a function. They solve the local trips. And as you remember, I said that the system is inequitable. And this is the best graphic I've seen about inequality in transport system. This is the time when trips start in the metropolitan area. And as you can see in the top left, in the outskirts of the city, many people start their trips at 4 a.m. or at 5 a.m. because they take 2 hours to get from their homes to their jobs. The central areas, which are the wealthiest ones, they started the trips at 8 a.m., 4 hours later. The system is not fair, it's not equitable. And the outskirts of the city are the areas in which the transport system is worst. That's why when we started the government, we decided we needed to change the situation. It's a long task, it's a really complicated task, but we focused our work basically in two areas. First, to integrate the transport system in one single entity, or at least a single idea. And second, to improve the modes, to connect peripheral areas, to improve modes that serve the outskirts of the city where the most deprived people live, and also to rescue some of the system that the city used to have. And I love this image. As you may remember, I show you in previous slides, there were different logos and all were different, different design. And the first thing we did was to create a single image for the different modes. So in the center, we have the logo of the integrated mobility, me. And the rest are the logos of all the different modes. Again, the problem is not technology, it's governance. These modes had to be planned and managed as a single one. I know for Singapore, this is an old idea, but for us, it's new and it's extremely complicated. And we also included bicycles because bicycles are part of the public transport systems. One of the first things we did was renew our payment. I know this looks simple, it's not sexy, not attractive, but it's pretty important. We used to have an old card which was really easy to copy, and we launched a new card that can be used for all the transport system, and in the future you can have an integrated fare. But also we need to we decided to recover what the city used to have some decades ago, and this is the best example. Trolley buses. 20, 30 years ago, 30 years ago, in the 80s and the early 90s, the city used to have almost 500 kilometers of cable, where trolley buses cover all the city. However, the cable disappeared, many services disappeared, and by 2018, the remaining lines were cover only 200 kilometers, and the trolley buses were in extremely bad shape. They didn't have good enough maintenance. They were old and comfortable, etc. So we decided, well, if all the whole world is moving towards electromobility, our way to move towards electromobility will be via trolley buses. We know the technology is zero emission, buses are cheaper, and they work, and people love them. So these are the new trolley buses. We've already purchased almost 200 trolley buses, and the travel experience is incredible. But there, we didn't only renew the fleet, we also created new lines. And this is the way we are going towards electromobility. This is light system that with the south of the city. Again, we recovered the system. The trains are old; they are almost 30 years old, but the railway was almost 100 years old. Until December last year, traveling in this train was extremely slow experience. it took almost an hour to cover just 10 kilometers. So the decision was to change the railway. And, and we changed the railway, the refurbished the stations, and some minor adjustments. And now the same old trains can cover the same distance in half the time. Again, first we fix, then we purchase or renew the fleet. These are the new electric buses. There are just a few running now. These are pure electric buses, not trolley bus. We are our transition from diesel buses to electric buses will take a while. But now we are testing new buses. We are working with some articulated buses in BRT lines. So hopefully next year we will have a huge BRT line that covers and runs for 54 kilometers, and it will have almost 200 electric buses, hopefully. But as I told you, it's not only renew the fleet. We need to create new lines for with dedicated lanes for the extension of the BRT lines. Currently, the city comes with 7 BRT lines that run around 160 kilometers. And this system, the cable system, was launched today. And that's how we fight against inequality. Because this cable system provides service to one of the most deprived areas in the city. An area that, as you can see, that is in a steep slope, narrow streets in which it's almost impossible to provide mass transit system. We need to create something new. And this was our answer. The cable line. I think it's almost, I would say, it's a Latin American invention. Use cable cars as mass transport systems. First in Colombian cities, then Bolivia, Brazil, Venezuela, and now it's time of Mexico. This is our first line, Cablebus, which is integrated with the rest of the mass transport system. This line, today we launched the first stage of this line, but it will run for almost 10 kilometers in June of this year. New cycle lanes. It's important to incorporate bicycle in the whole transportation system. This I'm showing this not because it's the best one, because it's the newest one. It was we built it, I think, 2 weeks ago. And our goal is to have 600 kilometers of bike lanes by 2024. Now we are implementing almost 60, 70 kilometers per year, which is a lot for Mexican standards. Again, we need high standards, wide cycle lanes, well protected. I think we are pretty sure that this is the best way to attract new people biking in the city. And again, connection. The city is building huge bike parking lots in some metro stations. Intermodality is basic in a city like this. In the outskirts of the city is where people use bicycle most. But there were no cycle lanes, and there was not any connection with the metro. So we created this bicycle parking lots. This was launched in November, December, and it has a capacity for more than 400 bicycles. And it's right next to a terminal station of the metro system. in the municipality of Tláhuac, which is where people bike most, cycle most in the city. But we also have to recognize some informal modes. Informality in many ways is smart because it provides a good answer to specific needs in the of the city. So we are working with some companies to develop a new busy taxi, we call it. It's a cab using an electric bike with a design appropriated for the outskirts of the city, where streets many times are not paved or the quality is not good. So we need to create something new and cheap and zero emission, because our fear is that many guys who provide this service are switching from bicycles to motorcycles, which is not a good news because motorcycles are extremely pollutant. So we're trying to figure out solutions in between electric bicycles, for instance. One good example of this of our action has been seen in the COVID crisis, and I will show you a glimpse because I like to have it in questions and answers. What are the main challenges? I think I shared this presentation with other Latin American cities, and basically we are facing the same challenges. Now we've experienced an increasing number of trips. We reached a low point in March, April 2020, when we experienced a decrease of 80%. Now we are experiencing a decrease of 30% of number of trips, but the number is growing faster in the case of private modes, cars and motorcycles. In the case of private public modes, public transportation, the recovery is going at a slower pace. Participation of private modes is increasing among the split. This is bad news, but could be good news. Bad news because we are seeing more cars in the streets, more motorcycles. Many people are afraid to travel in public transport because of COVID. The good news is the number of trips made by bicycle has increased a lot, and I think it's a global trend, or this in Latin America. Fewer kilometers traveled, increasing the number of short distance local trips, and this is very important. The trips are moving towards off-peak hours. We are changing the hours in which most trips are being made, and this is pretty also a good news. I will show you some graphs. And one last trend is the explosive growth of delivery services. The trend came free, but COVID, since people couldn't go outside, since there was a lockdown, these delivery services became pretty necessary for many people. And there are thousands of guys delivering in bicycles, motorcycles, cars, anything. It's also a good answer for unemployment caused by COVID. These are the traffic trends, as I show you. We've been working, and now I'm speaking a little about technology. We've been working closely with some platforms or some services like TomTom or Google, Waze, sorry, in order to map the behavior of mobility. We can map the behavior of mobility every day, every hour. And this is what I show you. This is the metro ridership from March to March. You can see some areas painted in red and orange. Red is the color of the semaphore epidemic semaphore. In the case in December, the city went to red again. Red means that there are many activities that are prohibited. The number of trips decreased a lot. Now we are orange again, but we are still seeing a huge decrease in the number of trips made by metro. As you can see, there are only 50% of the trips made by at the same time last year. The BRT system, the same thing. This is how some trips are made. The black line in the top are local trips. The other trips are long distance trips. And this is how I summarize model trends. Bicycles, motorcycles, and cars are going up. Public transport is the big loser of this pandemic. The main challenges: keep social distance, avoid sharing sustainable modes, I mean, public transport, bicycle, to cars and motorcycles. This is pretty important. I won't have time to discuss about this, but it's necessary to guarantee financial sustainability of public transport and to sustain the process of technological improvement of modes in a time when financial resources are scarce. What I mean, the technological shift towards electromobility is expensive, and this is not the best time to have to be involved in big investments for city. Strategies, basically the same strategies that have been implemented all over the world: protection for operator users, and this is pretty important: transport demand management. We've been discussing transport demand management for many years, and the pandemic gave us the possibility to really implement transport demand management strategies oriented to reduce the number of trips. That's what we always wanted to have. And I will show you some examples. Well, this is some examples of protections for operators and users. Some campaigns, and we are using the image of the Mexican wrestlers in order to encourage the use of face mask. And we are implementing some social distance measures in some stations. It is a metro station. In the first weeks of the pandemic, we implemented this in some buses, and it's pretty important. We encourage people to travel in low demand hours. We encourage people to avoid peak hours if they could do that. Why? Because it allows us to have a better operation. It's good because we can improve the frequency, and because we can avoid agglomerations in some stations. This is the translation. Avoid peak hours if you have to travel from 9 to 5 is better. That was our slogan. Travel from 9 to 5. Avoid peak hours. And also, bicycle is a great option. And this is how traffic is, this traffic behavior, hourly demand, as you can see, peak hours in the morning and afternoon are disappearing. There's only one soft slope. Again, this is in the case of urban highways, which have experienced a huge decrease. This is the metro. The light orange area is the demand that metro had by March 2020. The orange area, but the brown area is the demand in April, May. and the orange line, the red line, is the demand right now. Our demand in BRT, and this is the last part. We need to offer some options to people to move. Bicycle, I think, is a great winner, and COVID pandemic gave us the opportunity to propose, to implement all the things we want to implement, but nobody wants to try. And this is the best example. Emerging bike lanes. This bike lane has 40 kilometers in one of the main streets of the city. If I had proposed this thing 2 years ago, I would have been fired because I was crazy. But in the context of pandemic, in which we needed to provide new options and we needed to avoid agglomerations in the stations of BRT station that you can see on the left, we created this. There was fewer traffic, so we created this, and it has been a success. The number of users has threefolded in 8 months. Again, other measure, sidewalk expansion for restaurants, so you can eat with safe distance in the open areas. People love this because, yeah, this was a parking lot, a parking spot. There used to be cars there. Now there are plants, there are umbrellas, and some restaurants, in order to attract people, have created some little gardens, and I think the result is great. We also pedestrianized some areas in the downtown last year, not now, in order to provide more space and not to close stores. And we're also documenting this in some manuals, etc. One of the main challenges, as I told you, financing public transport. I won't stop here, and I like to stop here. I think this is the last slide. Opportunities. I don't know the situation in Singapore, but in the case of Mexico City and the Latin American cities, COVID in many ways has been a great opportunity to do many things we wanted to do before. Massification and consolidation of travel demand management strategies. Teleworking, long distance working has been great for us because the number of trips has decreased. Well, now I'm participating in a seminar in Singapore. In 2018, I would have to travel. I prefer to be in Singapore, definitely. I've never been there. But it takes 36 hours to get there, jet lag, etc. And for me, it's really difficult to be absent from my job for more than 2 or 3 days. So this is economic. It's easy to implement. The good opportunity is time to walk, time to cycle. There are many opportunities to create new cycling infrastructure. Fast modernization of administrative procedures, because many people couldn't attend or couldn't go to some public offices to get a license, etc. We had to create some new procedures. So you could get a license remotely using internet, etc. That means poor travel. Think and manage streets as flexible, adaptable spaces. The example of restaurants using parking spots. And as I told you, it's the right time to do what the mobility sector always wanted to do. Because now we have new advocates, people who want social distance. Now, for instance, the restaurant owners. The restaurant owners never wanted, for instance, parking demand management, because they wanted the parking spots for the customers. But now they need to create new areas to serve. These parking spots change to gardens with tables and seats have proven to be successful, and restaurant owners, that's what they want. That's what they told us. Please, we want this part pocket parts be permanent, and that's what we're doing. And that's it. I think we have some minutes for some questions and answers. And I'm really sorry for my poor English. I haven't spoken English for a long time.
No, don't say that. Can you hear me, right, Rodrigo? Oh, okay. Okay, so we have some time for questions, Rodrigo. So I think you can see the questions in the Q&A and the chat. So, but let me read it for all the people. I mean, the first question that we have is there a reason why BRT has only less than 10% market share in Mexico? So that's the first question. We have 5 more questions. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, it's just 10%, but it's 1.5 million trips a day. It's a lot. BRT, the problem with BRT is that they are extremely complicated to implement. BRTs are cheaper than metro lines, but they face opposition from neighbors because many people don't like to get rid of lanes that used to be for cars. They sometimes they are barriers in the street. It's something that BRTs are very space consuming. That's the main problem. So it's not easy to implement everywhere. And the first lanes, I mean, were built at a very fast pace, but the newest lines have been extremely complicated to implement because they have faced public opposition. And we've been involved in long, tiring negotiations with neighbors, with store owners. So that's the problem. But it's a system that moves 1.5 million people every day. It's the second largest in Latin America, behind Bogota. Bogota, a city that doesn't count a metro system.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let me go to the second question. So this is from Spela. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I couldn't help but notice that on all the photos that you have shown so far, the users of public transport seem to mostly be young, middle-aged men. Is there a reason for this, perhaps safety? If so, how do you enhance safety on public transport for vulnerable groups such as women, older people, and children?
That's a very good question, and I really appreciate it. There's one reason, and it's very embarrassing. Mexico City is considered a very dangerous place for women, and harassment, sexual harassment in public transport is a reality, and it's a huge problem. Numbers say that users of public transport are half men, half women. But since the environment is considered dangerous for women, we had to implement dedicated spaces for women. So in the case of Metro, the 3 first cards are for women only, and kids and children. That's why there are not women in my pictures, because I took the pictures and I couldn't go there. That's why there are only men only in the pictures. But if the number of the ridership is basically half and half. That's a problem. Again, and one more thing. This policy of dedicated space has proven to be successful. It's very controversial because women feel safer in dedicated space, in dedicated cars or buses. But on the other hand, it's not normal to have to travel divided. It's in some sense, it's an extremely violent situations to have cards for women and cards for men.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. So let me go to the next question. So this is from Sylvain. Speaking of governance of a large metro area, there is an obvious need for central coordination and planning. At the same time, in an administratively divided metro area, how much space could be given to decentralized approaches of transportation? So Sylvain also put an example. No? Tokyo is famous for its private rail lines based on a land rent capture model. In a spirit of decentralization, could metropolitan governance, for example, consist in defining a regulatory framework of technological commercial interoperability for independently run transportation networks? That's a question.
I think Tokyo is not a good example because Tokyo is an exception. I mean, the other city like Tokyo is Hong Kong, in which the operator is also the owner of the land over the metro line. So that's why you can, the owner of the metro line can create his own demand. Tokyo is something very special, very specific. Metro coordinates is extremely complicated, and sometimes we decided to have a very pragmatic approach because if Mexico City is a mess, the situation in the neighboring state of Mexico is worse. The number of minibuses is, nobody knows the number. They might be 80,000 minivans and not regulated, etc. So we've been in touch with the authorities of the neighboring state of Mexico in some specific projects. In some specific projects, in some connections, in some BRT lines, we're working together. And starting very slowly, I think it's a very piecemeal approach, step by step, in order to create some lines or some points of connection. Because a holistic approach, it's very, very complicated. It might be extremely time-consuming, complicated, and politically, I think it's not feasible right now. It's better to have some coordination in some specific project and then advance to something more complicated.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Let me go to the next question. This is from Laura Fernandez. Hi, Rodrigo, SUTD student here from Mexico City.
Laura.
I understand that public transportation is quite a challenge in our city. I consider safety one of the major issues, which from my experience is more unsafe in the micros, peceros, like the informal buses, Are there any strategies to address organization and regulation regarding micros or peceros, which for those who do not know, micro is like the
Minibus.
The minibus, correct.
It's a minibus, quasi-formal minibus. Thanks, Laura. You're right, Laura. Definitely, the minibuses are not only considered, are in fact more dangerous for women, for children than metro or BRT, because at least in metro BRT there are police officers in every station. In the case of buses, that's impossible. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, we didn't even have a register, and we still don't know it, but we are creating it. It's again, it's very time consuming, but that's how we can start. A register of vehicles and a register of drivers. That's the first step. And the register is not complete yet. It will take a while, but we are working on it. And I'll give you one example. When we started our term, the number we had in our mind of minibuses was 24,000. After having something like a register to review all the data, now the number has decreased to 15,000. There were 19 ghosts that nobody knows where they were. When we have a register, when we have of drivers and units and minibuses, we can control these minibuses. We are also having in project, which is our implementation. Each of these minibuses now has a GPS and a camera inside, so we can track the behavior of the drivers, if they comply with the rules of the traffic, etc., if they are speeding, and if there's a case of sexual harassment or other crime, there's a camera and there's a record in which we can investigate, and that can give us proofs. In fact, that has happened many times. So there are many things to do, and I won't deny that. Peceros, that Laura comments, are not a safe place, definitely, but we are trying to change this. And I can speak about this for hours, but I think we don't have so much time for this.
Very good. Thank you very much, Rodrigo and Laura. So let's move to the next question. So this is from Winston Yap. Thank you for the comprehensive snapshot of Mexico's smart mobility. I found the idea of cable car mobility striking. The idea speaks directly to inequality by offering marginalized communities a surreal travel experience, and it also overcomes travel limitations due to a steep gradation. However, cable cars are typically expensive to build and maintain, can be considered inefficient, and are typically employed for leisure purposes, justifying high cost per passenger. My question is about cost. What are the plans to sustain and develop this initiative?
You are right, Winston. As one Colombian scholar, Darío Hidalgo, usually says, cable cars are an expensive toy, and they are. But what I mean, they're expensive toys. They need subsidies. They have to be subsidized. And high quality transport must be subsidized, not only cable cars. It's impossible for the lowest income people to pay the real cost of providing a high quality transportation. The challenge is how to create the financial framework, the financial system to finance high quality transportation modes. The Latin American invention is that cable cars are not for leisure, are a real transport system. And in the experience of Medellin, of Cali, of Bogota, of La Paz, in La Paz, Bolivia is the poorest country of South America. And the cable car in La Paz, and that connects La Paz with El Alto, it's a massive transport system. It's massive because there's a network that connects people who live in areas where accessibility is extremely complicated. So I think the key of success is in our case, for instance, as I mentioned, is that cable is connected to the metro. If you go to Medellin or go to the cable car, the purpose is to provide accessibility, but it is connected to the mass transport system that covers the rest of the city. When the cable cars are isolated, probably they will fail. But if they are part, the last mile part of a whole system, it changes, really changes lives. It's a huge experience. I've talked with people in Colombia, because this was our first day in Mexico City, but traveling with people in Colombia, in Cali, Medellin or Cali, and they told me, cable car means 1 more hour for me, 1 more hour with my family, 1 more hour of sleep, traveling in a high quality system, which is not overcrowded, and where I can have an incredible view. So I think these cable cars are an incredible tool to fight inequality in our cities, because they provide accessibility to the most deprived areas in which providing mass transport system is almost impossible.
Very good. Thank you so much for your response. There is a last question here from Francisco Benita. He's also a Mexican researcher here in SUTD. Is the strategy against COVID to reduce the frequency of buses and metro? That's why the number of rides decrease. Other cities have opted for keeping or increasing frequency in public transport. Would this help in Mexico City?
We basically kept frequencies, because if we decrease frequencies, we would have experienced crowdings in stations and crowdings in trains and buses. That's something we didn't want to see. Now you can see some overcrowding in some buses, but it's nothing compared with what we had 1 year ago. So it's expensive, yeah, because you have half of the ridership and the same operational costs. But it's the only way to have something like social distance in metro or buses. Something we did was to close some stations, some low demand stations. We closed them so we could provide a better frequency. So we could increase the operational speed of metro, particularly metro, but just for some weeks.
Very good. So I think that was the last question. I just have a last comment and question for you, Rodrigo. This is more personal question. So I feel that when you talk about the solutions implemented in Mexico, some of them are really very kind of indigenous, in the sense that the reality is shaping the solutions. But some other solutions come from other parts within Latin America, And I noticed that in particular from Colombia, for example, this Metrobus, which they call, if I'm not mistaken, Transmillennium.
Transmillennium.
So I also feel that in Colombia, they kind of have exported this technology. My question is, to what extent are we accepting that technology, or are we changing this or adapting the technology we are importing from Colombia? Do you think is
it's a good question. In case of BRTs, BRTs are Brazilian invention. The first one was in Curitiba in 1975, and then in Quito in the late 90s. Transmilenio is from 2000. However, Transmilenio changed the reality of BRTs because Transmilenio provided stamina to BRTs. They created the 2 lanes BRTs with huge stations. Transmilenio is a metro overground with buses. Really, it's a metro. It has the capacity of a metro system with a 10% of cost. But it's not a metro. Again, why Colombia did this? Because Bogota doesn't have metro. In our case, we adapted some things. When we decided to implement this cable, we not only visited Colombian cities, we visited cities in Bolivia, La Paz, to see what are the tips for success. Because I have to be, we need to be careful. Some of these cable cars have been a big failure in Rio, Brazil, in Caracas, because they were not connected to the mass transit system. So not all the Latin American solutions are good. We need to implement some things. I show you the electric bicycle used as a cab. This is pretty indigenous. And the design, because our first reaction was to have an electric tuk-tuk, as you can see in Thailand and in Vietnam. Yeah, but the wheels are pretty small. It's different. They're low, and the streets in Mexico City, in the outskirts, have a big slope, a steep slope. Sometimes are not unpaved, so we needed big wheels, a light vehicle, and which had to be very cheap. So that's why we created this hybrid, which has been implemented in other areas, but we implemented, or we designed for the specific streets of one specific area, Tláhuac. And that's why we are been traveling, but sorry, we are testing this many times because we need a specific cyclotaxi for this for Mexico City. So some solutions are indigenous, some are in between. We have some BRTs implemented for Mexican reality. Bike lanes are not the same in Latin America. I think in my case, or in our case, I prefer to be pretty flexible in this thing, in the design. I don't like so much manuals, because sometimes solutions you have to be adapted on site, and sometimes for instance, BRTs in some areas have to share lane with cars. We need to create something in between, because our cities were not planned, or some areas were not planned. There's a huge participation of the informal sector, and we need to recognize it, because informal sector, there's some wisdom there, and I think a smart city, smart mobility policy has to recognize that wisdom and shape it in a more efficient way.
Very good. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I think we are done. So that will be the end of the webinar. We would like to thank you for your time. We know that you're very busy, and I mean the problems in Mexico take a lot of time. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, more than busy, I'm hungry.
Yeah, no, we understand that. We understand that. So we hope we will enjoy your dinner. Thank you very much for your time. And again, we really appreciate what you have done. I mean, your knowledge about Mexico and your perspectives are going to be always very appreciated by the audience. And we are going to share with you, of course, these questions for you to have. And thank you again. Thank you all the participants. Thank you the audience. And we will let you know when it's going to take place the next webinar. Thanks again, Rodrigo, for your time. Okay.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Great to see you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.